My next guest has helped Fortune 500 clients as a global sales executive for over 20 years. She is Chief Learning Officer with Sistas In Sales, which empowers women of color across the sales sector. She prides herself on changing mindsets as well as inspiring others into action. Author of What is in the C.A.R.D.S, 5 post-pandemic sales strategies. I think you've got it there, haven't you?
I do.
There we go. What's in the cards? Thank you. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Cherilynn Castleman.
Thank you, Janice. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's lovely to have you because I know we've been circling for such a long time, and I think I've attended, well, I know I've attended some of the Sisters in Sales, brilliant work that you do there. But first of all, this area around diversity, because I know that, you know, that's one of the areas, women in sales and diversity, that we've been circling with. So that's where I want to start this conversation. Okay. And ask you about what has changed. Have we gone far enough? Is there more to go? What are the strategies that you're using? Because I know you're going into companies and you're talking to them about this very area.
So I find companies are saying, yes, we're ready. We're ready. Ben and Jerry's had a statement that said silence is not an option. But what's missing is, so what do we do with that? So companies are saying, okay, we don't want to be silent. Managers are saying, I don't want to be silent, but what do I do? So a couple things that I do is, one, I teach how to have safe conversations. And the second thing is I encourage people to hire people that don't look like them. I always laugh. I don't know if you know her, Angelique Slagle. Angelique Slagle is a current head of SAP SuccessFactors. She managed over $992 million in business. She has over 600 million users on her platform. Angelique started as a secretary 20 years ago at IBM, saw what the salespeople were driving, decided she wanted to drive that. And I say to people, Angelique also has 5 kids. On Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, Angelique is not going to the bar with you. She may not fit culturally. So connect with people on LinkedIn who may not look like you. Connect with people that, if you want to build your network so that you can hire from your network, broaden your network. So that's one of the first things I do. We at Sisters in Sales work with companies on how to attract, hire, and retain women of color in sales. And so we have lots of strategies that we work with companies on. But the other thing that I do is I talk about safe conversations. And what I talk about with safe conversations is, it's an acronym, and it stands for, S stands for stance. If you are a manager, if you are a leader, take a stance. Let your team know what you will not tolerate. A stands for appreciate. If you are not Black or brown, you have to appreciate that your experience is different than mine when you leave the office. And what I mean by that is I share a story that I am a motorcycle. I love riding. My husband, we ride motorcycles. And so, you know, I have black pants and black boots and the big padded shoulder jacket with bright yellow. And when I get off the motorcycle, I put on a baseball cap because I have helmet hair. And I went into a Target, a local store here in the States, and in the white neighborhood. Now, everybody in Target wears red shirts and khaki bottoms everywhere. I am in my motorcycle gear, and a white guy comes up to me and says, "Do you work here?" And he got in my face and got very angry because I wouldn't help him. He just knew that I had to work there. And so I share this story to say, if you are not Black or brown, when you go out into the community, your experience is different than mine. You have to appreciate that. F stands for feelings. Be in touch with your feelings and be vulnerable in how you share that. And E stands for empathy. And one of the big things I talk about in my book, and for anybody who's selling as we're coming out of this pandemic, is empathy. And the reason what I say about empathy is, I don't know about you, Janice, when you first started selling, but I was taught the feel, felt, found method. Are you familiar with that? Yeah. Okay. And you say to somebody, I know how you feel. I have felt the same way. Here's what I found. And I found that our solution solves every problem. Well, that's not empathy. Anytime you start with the word I, you're not being empathetic. And so I tell people, just be present with people. And so if you can take a stance, if you can appreciate that our experiences are different, if you can be okay being vulnerable with your feelings, and you can be empathetic, you can start having some of these safe conversations.
I think it's interesting that especially sales leaders and managers have to be okay with themselves. That's where this starts. You have to be all right with yourselves, even if you've had, we've all had limited experiences, but we put all the limited experience and then we've had a wealth of experience together. But being okay that, your parameters are there, and being willing to step out of them and say, look, my vulnerability is I only know this, I've only experienced this, but I'm okay with that. I feel fine with that because I'm stepping outside and asking you to help me to explore the rest of the world that I don't know. But you've got to be comfortable with yourself first to do that, to allow your vulnerability to come out. So how do you and especially if you're in a leadership role, they may feel that they're going to be judged by that when they let their guard down. So how do you get past that?
So it's okay to, so especially right now, when we are coming out of, when everybody has been battered and bruised from this pandemic, every single one of our clients is different. Everybody's experience, whether you are selling with your toddler under your desk, or in my case, selling with my musical theater daughter, doing her dancing on her above my head in the, in the kitchen while I'm in my office, whether you are worried about an elderly parent in a nursing home and you can't visit them because of the pandemic. Every one of us is feeling emotions that we haven't felt. Every one of us is overwhelmed. And so sharing just says, I'm human. So I think because all of us are human and all of us have gone through this, people are not going to harass you about that. And if you treat everyone like, and you have to remember, everyone is somebody's daughter or son or husband or wife or grandparent or sister or brother. Treat everybody the way you would want your family treated, and they will treat you that way. And so that allows you to be vulnerable.
Do you think that this is almost like a window of opportunity where people are allowed to let down their guard and not be judged by it, because we've all experienced this trauma together? And if you kind of miss the bubble, if you think, I'll do it in a couple of years, it's kind of you haven't almost exercised that muscle, and it's going to be a bit strange then.
Right. And you're right. For some of us, being empathetic is new. And so one other tip that I have is start with empathetic listening. And what empathetic listening is, there's 3 levels of listening. A lot of salespeople, we learned 1 and 2. So first level listening is what I call restaurant listening. And it's when you go to a restaurant and they say, we have steak and salmon and we have roasted vegetables. And in your head, you're going, well, I really don't want steak. I had fish yesterday. Maybe I'll have the roasted. You're talking in your head. You are not listening. A lot of us, that's level 1 listening. That's how we listen. Level 2 listening is what I was taught originally in sales, and that's reflective listening. Somebody says, oh, I'm really sad. And you say, oh, I hear you feeling sad. You just reflect back what they said. Level 3 listening is empathetic listening, and is listening for what's going on between the words. And the best way to do empathetic listening is to pause. And what I encourage people to do is what I call box breathing. Take a deep breath in, hold it for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, and hold that for 4 counts. What box breathing does, even if you just take 1 or 2, it brings your heart rate down, it brings your blood pressure down, it quiets your brain, and allows you to actually listen to somebody. And listening, and truly listening to people, is one of the most empathetic things that you can do. And so I tell sales leaders, sales managers, sales professionals, listen to each other, listen to your clients. Then they will solution with you. And then you're not selling. If you connect with them, and we all now have something to connect about, okay? Every one of us has been touched by this pandemic. So as we're coming out of the pandemic, just listen to people, connect with them empathetically. And like I said, if being vulnerable is something that you're not comfortable with, then start just with empathetic listening.
Lovely, lovely. So let's talk about your book, C.A.R.D.S. What does that stand for? The 5 post-pandemic sales strategies.
So the C.A.R.D.S comes from an article that I read, originally put out by Harvard Business Review in May of 2020, where they looked at the skills that actually women have when they sell. And they said that going into 2021, women will outsell men because there are about 4 or 5 qualities. And so C.A.R.D stands for collaboration, analysis, relationships, development, and strategic. And these are areas that women have historically excelled at over men. And these are the skills that you need to sell coming out of the pandemic. So when you think about C.A.R.D and you think about collaboration, rather than one of the things that I do is I challenge people. And one of my mentors years ago told me, Cherilynn, if you criticize people, you raise their defensiveness. But if you challenge people, you raise their game. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, what if, instead of how we have historically sold, where we spent 20% of our time building relationship and 80% of our time selling, Janice, what if we flip that and we spent 80% of our time getting closer to problems and then 20% of our time solutioning with them? And so that's what collaboration is. It is connecting with clients, collaborating, solutioning with them rather than selling to them. Analysis is thinking about things more deeply, looking for root causes. And then R stands for relationships, which we've talked about, listening, connecting, building a relationship with somebody, understanding if you're working with somebody and they're distracted, understanding, well, what's going on? Do they have their toddler under their desk? Are they worried about a family member? You have to connect with them there before you start solutioning with them. The other, when you think of development, women tend to be more open-minded. Be open-minded, be open to new experiences, be open to new ideas. One of the things I challenge people to do is go and get a perspective from somebody who doesn't look like you. If you're a male, get a woman's perspective. If you're a woman, get a man. If you're elderly, get a teenager's perspective. Be open to others' perspective. I'm sorry. And finally, S is strategy and strategic. And what strategy is to me is it's about visioning. And so one of the exercises that I encourage people to do, whether it's with your team or with your client, is I talk about wish, wild wish, and fantasy. Mm-hmm. And so I say to a client, and I've done this with the president of one of the top health insurance companies here in the United States. Instead of saying, well, what are your goals? I say, well, okay, Janice, what is your wish? Mm-hmm. And then I say, Janice, if we can make that come true, that's easy. What is your wild wish? And then once Janice tells me her wild wish, I say, Janice, what is your fantasy? And if you ask clients what their fantasy is around where their problem is, they will tell you what their solution is. Then you just work with them to make that happen. You're not selling, you're just solutioning with them. So that's part of the strategy. Yeah. So that's what C.A.R.D stands for. It's collaboration, analytical, relationship, development, and strategy.
So in the book, you discuss those things, but give people the tools in order to apply them.
Correct. So for each of the ones, so under collaboration, I talk about how to connect with people on a Zoom call. One of the things that I do on a Zoom call, with every Zoom call, I start by saying, you know what, one of the things that I love doing is I love going in the kitchen and making reservations, because that's the best thing that I make in the kitchen is I don't cook. All I do is make reservations. They chuckle, it makes them laugh. And then I say, one of the things that I'm hearing from most people that I meet with is they've had a new or unusual cooking or dining experience since the pandemic. What's the coolest dining or cooking experience you've had? Yeah. And so people tell me, what happens is people are not Zoom fatigued. People are fatigued about, oh, we're in a pandemic. Oh, how are you? This is horrible. Figure out a way to make people laugh. Figure out a way to connect with people. So I talk about that as an example under collaboration on ideas, how to have better Zoom calls, how to connect with people, how to listen, how to tell, how to have better relationships, how to get people to tell you about their vision, how to have a good enough isn't attitude and make things better. So those are things that.
I think you're absolutely right. The clients that are easy to get through are the ones that enjoy the conversation. You know, we kind of need a bit of light relief from the kind of the drudgery of the day. We all have too much on our plates. We were talking about that before we started recording. And so, you know, if a call's coming through for someone that's just going to be a bit of light relief,
Right.
you know, that's going to lift your day, then you really want to have that call if you can possibly have that. Often I get clients that will say, okay, so what are we here to talk about? You know, they're asking me to, you know, whatever it may be, you know, now we've had the fun, they're
Right.
eager to get the job done. You know, so I think it's a good strategy to have, to actually think, well, okay, I'm going to lift someone's day. I'm going to have some fun with them. Not waste their time and allow it to go on for too long, but you know, you're more likely to be able to get through to them, you know, going forward into the future, aren't you?
Right. And then after they've chuckled and you guys have connected on whatever you started with, then I encourage people to do what I call the 4 F's of a discovery call. And the first one I ask people, okay, let's just be honest. We are in a pandemic. What was it like the first time you did X in the pandemic? So what was it like the first time you talked to a client? Or what was it like the first time you did, in your case, Janice, a podcast?
Mm.
And because everybody's experience is different. So ask them to share with you, what was the first time like? The second question I ask is, what was your failure? So now that we've been doing this, we've been doing things differently. You know, Janice, I'm sure you've had a failure podcast. So what was that like? What was your failure? The next one I ask is, what was your finest? So the third F was, what was your finest? And I would say, Janice, what was your finest podcast? What was the best guest you've ever had? And then the final question I ask is, Janice, what would your future podcast look like if you could control everything? Mm-hmm. Now, what I've done is I've learned how the pandemic is impacting you. I've learned what is your bane of your existence, what really hurt, what you're really embarrassed, or what really hurt, or what's really broken because of this, what you feel really proud about, and what would be the perfect solution. And can you see, from once I have those answers, how I can very easily start solutioning with you?
Yeah.
I would say, well, Janice, how would you go about making that happen? What would you need to make that happen?
Yeah.
I'm not selling. I have, and I would say, I really want to know what your experience was. What was it like with your worst podcast? You know, and those are the questions that I ask. So I start with connecting, making them feel good, go into the 4 F's so that I can do the discovery. I've talked about the pandemic without saying, I know this is horrible, but what was your failure? We all had a failure. We all had something, because things have changed. And I promise you that everything about your clients and customer behavior today is different than it was in 2019. 100% guaranteed.
Yeah. Which is why you need to go through discovery again. This is a whole new world. Don't rely on what's in your CRM system, you know, beginning of 2020, because, you know, everything's changed, doesn't it? Yeah. You need to rediscover.
And that's why I encourage the clients that I'm coaching, or anywhere that I'm doing sales kickoff training or coaching. I was like, you want a great opportunity? Call every one of your clients and have this and use the 4 F's. They will be so thrilled that you just call. You're not calling to sell. You're just calling, hey, I'm just calling to see how you're doing. I just want to find out. I have 4 quick questions for you. I just want to know what's changed.
Yeah.
And they will tell you if they have a gap, and then that they need more services, or they need to upgrade, or they need more product, or you have a client that maybe didn't need your product before. Now you come in and you just ask these 4 questions. You may find out that they have a gap and they're ready to help solution with you.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'm going to use that, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will too, along with buying your book. So, you know, tell me, what's one tried and tested strategy? And I know you've given us a lot. One tried and tested strategy you would offer listeners to help them to scale their sales.
So one of the things that I would say, and this is, I know may sound a little, I think this may sound corny, but I think that if you think about your lived experiences, every one of us has a superpower. Step back, think about what your superpower is, and leverage that with your vulnerability when you're going in to sell. If you connect with people, connect with people. If you are great at finance, read the financials, find out what's going on with those companies and do your research. Immerse yourself in your client's world. One of the things that I talk to people about is just diving into your client's world and finding out what's going on with them and leveraging your superpower. And if you don't know what your superpower is, real quick technique is send an email out to 5, 6 of your colleagues or friends and ask them, hey, tell me what are 3 things that I do well? And remind me about one positive experience that we've had. Once those emails come back in, take that, copy it, drop it in your phone in your notes section. And if you read through there, your superpower is sitting right in there looking at you. Take that and let that be your superpower. And let that be as you reinvent and as we reimagine and return coming back from this pandemic, use your superpower because that's who you are. And sometimes we forget what it was.
Fantastic. That is brilliant. We do forget what it was because we get so bogged down in the day-to-day and everything like that. So tell me, who is your hero or shero?
So Ursula Burns is my shero. Ursula was the former CEO of Xerox. At the time, she was the only African-American woman head of a Fortune 100 company. And as she was stepping down and moving on to her next opportunity, she was interviewed. And I read the interview and what she said, and they were asking her why there weren't more women of color in the C-suite. And she said, women of color tend to go into marketing, HR, or the arts. And that will not get you into the C-suite, that you have to go where the juice is. And I paused and I said, wow, that is so powerful because it is true. We have to go into sales and we're very quick to say, I don't sell. But I challenge everybody that says they don't sell. And I know your audience are sellers, but if anybody who's not in sales is watching this because they're thinking about it, if you've ever gotten a 9-year-old to clean their room, you're in sales. If you've ever gotten a teenager to go to school, you're in sales. If you've ever gotten anybody to do anything, if you've ever applied for a job, you are in sales. We all sell. So my challenge is to everybody listening is you might as well get good at it. You might as well master it because if there's one skill that you will use in every job, it is sales. So learn to sell, master it. Anybody can learn it and you'll get good at it. It will help you advance your career. And so when I heard that, I actually started my own business, coaching and training and helping women that I coach become too good to be ignored. And I want them, whether they're applying for a sales job, moving to enterprise sales, or moving into sales leadership or the C-suite. I want them so good that they can't be ignored.
Oh, that's lovely. Wonderful way to kind of end this brilliant session. And thank you for sharing so much of your insights and knowledge. So how can listeners get hold of you? And I'll put loads of links in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. So if they want to connect with Sistas in Sales, they can go to www.sistasins.sales, Sistas in Sales. Join our membership. You can attend all the master classes that I teach. We do Friday forums. I do a virtual event every month. I write lots of blogs and posts, and so you can find out what's going on there. If you want to connect with me as far as coaching or training, you can connect with me at masterfulselling.com and just click on the link there and schedule time and get on my calendar. Or if you want to check out my book, you can check it out at postpandemicselling.com. The information about the book is there. There's a video where you can learn more about the book. The book is also available on Amazon. But that's how you can connect with me. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of posting. I talk to a lot of people on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect to anybody in your audience who wants to master their skills of selling or reimagine themselves as we're coming out of this pandemic.
And be too good to be ignored. I love that.
Right.
I love that.
Too good to be ignored.
Thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Cherilynn. It's been wonderful hearing your insights, your acronyms, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. I would love to come back and talk to your audience, and it's been absolutely delightful. Thank you.
Thank you. you.